am going to teach you a practical and easy way to apply color theory to your art. All it takes is asking yourself 3 simple questions. Because, let's face it, color theory can be extremely confusing. My channel is pretty small and new, so unless this video has gone viral, you've probably seen other videos on color theory before you ended up on mine. Those videos sit you in front of a color wheel, teach you the different arrangement of color schemes, and leave you with nothing else. It's easy to leave those lessons thinking, okay, but what now? That's why I made this simple list of questions, and if you ask yourself these 3 things, you are sure to know what kinds of colors to pick for your next piece. First question you need to ask yourself is, what is the feeling of your artwork? Art pretty much always has a feeling. Even if you're not depicting people, you can still create a landscape that is calming, or a horse painting that is energetic. Even if you try and create something without an emotion, you're likely to just create something that feels boring. If you know what feeling your piece is trying to have, you can create a color scheme that plays to this feeling. Colors tend to have meaning. This is a concept that you're probably already familiar with, but it's the idea that a color like red could represent anger or passion, and a color like blue can represent sadness or tranquility. Due to a lifetime of marketing and influence, different colors create different feelings in the viewer. So how can you play with the colors that you're using to attach to the feelings that you want your painting to have? There are lots of small subtleties, but generally speaking, warm colors, this is anything on the color wheel from red to yellow, tend to be associated with big, bright emotions. Things like anger, love, passion, happiness. And generally speaking, cooler colors, the rest of the color wheel, tends to be associated with more subtle and quiet feelings. This can be things like calmness, sadness, and thoughtfulness. A good example of feeling as color put into place is Disney's Inside Out and Inside Out 2. Put simply, each character is a feeling, and each character is represented by one main color. Anger is red, joy is yellow. Anxiety from Inside Out 2 is a bright, vibrant orange, emphasizing the chaotic nature of anxious feelings. So what kinds of colors match your piece? Keep that in mind as we move into the second question. Question number 2 is similar, but rather than asking what is the feeling of the piece, we're asking what is the story of your piece. Even if you're just doing a quick doodle in your sketchbook, you probably had some kind of idea in mind when you started doing it. Maybe you wanted to draw your OC. Maybe you were depicting a landscape of a happy beach day. Maybe it's an abstract painting that's meant to have a lot of motion and look lively. Most of the time there's something there, and what's there can guide the kinds of colors that you choose between 2 different options: naturalistic coloring and unnatural coloring. Natural colors are colors that mimic reality. If I was painting myself naturally right now, I would have brown skin, a yellow shirt, and purple eyeshadow. Because it looks more like what we see every day, the feelings tend to come across more subtly, but they're also easier to understand. Unnatural color, on the other hand, lends itself to artistic expression. Rather than sticking to the colors that you see in real life, you can pick whatever you want. The colors used imply the feeling and can help you in telling the story. However, if the story you're trying to tell is more nuanced or complicated, having these unnatural colors can make it harder for your viewer to understand your point. It can apply to anything, but let's look at some portraits, for example. First, we have this painting of Bob Ross with, as you can see, unnatural colors. Instead of having brown skin, his skin is shades of yellow, green, and blue. As we previously talked about, yellow implies happiness. So, using a color associated with that emotion in the center of Bob Ross's face helps bring out the story that he's happy. This next painting, contrarily, uses natural colors. Her expression is still happy, but without the artistic integrity of the colors, the happiness feels more subdued and gentle. And this final example is somewhere in between the 2. The oranges used on her skin are much too saturated and bright to be natural colors we would see in nature, but they still kind of suggest the tone of her skin. So while the piece is able to be bold, bright, and expressive, we still find ourselves looking at her smile as a show of what she's actually feeling, because it looks more to our brains like a typical person than like something we have to interpret. Contrarily for question 2, if there really is no story, you can ask yourself, what is the spacing? This is used commonly in landscapes and still life paintings, and the rule for this is simple. Warm colors advance towards the viewer. They tend to appear to be closer to you than anything else, and cool colors recede. Just the opposite, they tend to look like they're farther away. So consider your foreground, midground, and background, and consider getting cooler as you get further away from the viewer. Now for the third and final question. But before we get there, I do just like to say my channel is new and small. If you're enjoying this video, which if you've made it this far, you're probably enjoying it, then I would appreciate if you could subscribe, maybe hit the like button, leave a comment, give my channel some engagement, and help YouTube to understand that you and other artists like you want to see more videos like this. Okay, enough of that. On to the third question. The third thing you need to ask yourself when picking colors for your artwork is, do you need to create contrast? I want to make a separate video someday teaching you about the 12 principles of art, and spoiler for that video, contrast is one of my absolute favorites. It can create a lot of visual interest in a piece, and color can help add to the contrast. So does your piece have contrasting feelings, emotions, or two contrasting stories? Is there high contrast in how you did the shading in the piece? Do you want certain things to stand out and certain things to blend into the background? If so, you can use color to create this contrast. Generally, the rule is the further apart on the color wheel two colors are, the more contrasted they will be against each other. Contrarily to contrast, you might be looking to create unity in your piece. Maybe it's all one feeling, quite a cohesive story, and you just want to drill it in. If that's the case, you should pick colors on the color wheel that are as close together as possible. Once you've asked yourself these things, you can consider what kind of color scheme complements the feeling, the story or spacing, and the level of contrast that your artwork needs. Here's the part where I pull out the color wheel, but this time we have context. As I said before, if you want to create contrast, you should use colors that are far apart from each other. If you want to create unity, however, you should use colors that are close to each other. This could include something like a monochromatic color scheme, where you just focus on one color on the wheel. And to create that high contrast, you can instead do a complementary color scheme, where you focus on two colors that are directly across from each other, or as far apart as they could be on the wheel. Another way to create contrast but have colors that are easier to deal with is a split complementary color scheme. This is where, instead of doing the two colors across from each other, I'll pick the colors that are around purple, sort of splitting that side of the wheel in half. If you have a complex composition with lots of different objects, less distinction between your colors, or just need another way to use more colors but maintain contrast, you can go for other ways of creating distance on the color wheel. This includes themes like triadic, which is the three colors that are furthest apart from each other, square, which is the four colors that are furthest and equally apart from each other, tetradic, which is four complementary colors, or just splitting the wheel in half and focusing on all the warm colors or all the cool colors. I've done a lot of blabbing. It's time to look at some examples, but before we do that, there is one thing that you need to know. More important than color in your artwork is value. Values add depth and contrast. A lack of value should be an intentional choice because value also helps make your work readable. If you're not going to have much difference in value, you need to change what kind of piece you're making. A hue plus a dark value is called a shade of a color. My skin is a shade of orange, some might say. A hue plus a light value is called a tint of a color. This wall is a tint of blue, some might say. You can also use saturation to create the illusion of value. Bear in mind this is just the illusion, but a more saturated color will appear to be darker than a less saturated color. So now that you've remembered to add value to your colors, let's look at some ways these three questions can be used to pick a color scheme for painting. Now this is one of my pieces, titled Water White. If you really like it, you can check the link in the description to find my art shop and buy yourself a print of it at an affordable price. Let's look at what I decided to do for the colors on this one. I wanted to depict a woman walking into the water with a tranquil, calm, resting expression on her face. I wanted the artwork to represent peace, but I wanted a bit of ambiguity. Is she walking in the water to swim or to do something more deadly? To create that calm and tranquil feeling, I stuck with the cooler colors on the color wheel. There are some really bright tints, like the basically white of her hair, and some really deep values, like the darker blue of her shirt. but generally, I kept things more unified. This is a really close shot. I wanted the sky to look like it expanded forever, so I used a desaturated blue to make it seem like it was further in the distance and running into all edges of the paper. And because it's quite a simple idea and a simple composition, I was able to use more unnatural colors. Her skin is green, but we still understand that her face is a face, and we understand that general feeling of the piece. Create an extra punch of contrast and draw your attention to her smile. I did her lips in red, and they are the only thing on the canvas that is not a cool color. Let's try another example in case you still don't get it. Why don't we start this time with the 3 questions before I show you the piece? So number 1, what's the feeling? I want this piece to feel calm and tranquil, but I also want it to feel bold and empowered. I want to depict a woman who is beautiful and opulent in her existence. She's confident in herself, she's pleased with herself, but there's a power and a strength to her. I guess that kind of also answers what the story is. Finally, do I need contrast? Well, since I want her to be calm and powerful, I guess there is an inherent contrast to that. So let's see what decisions I made in the color scheme with those 3 questions answers in mind. The piece is also available for sale on my website, that is uncommoncanvasco.com, or you can find the link in the description. Duality here of a calm and tranquil woman who is still powerful and bold. I went with a split complementary color scheme to create a lot of contrast. The split is blue paired with yellows and oranges. Because again, my composition and my story was quite simple, I felt comfortable using unnatural colors and made her skin blue to better emphasize how calm she is and how peaceful she is in her self-confidence. The roses are an entirely gold-looking color to emphasize just how bright and bold she truly is on the inside. I had some pretty dark blues in this and some dark browns in my roses, so there's a lot of contrast in the values. That added contrast hints at her punching power, despite it all looking so calm. For another example, we can look outside of my work. As a matter of fact, we can just look outside of paintings in general. As someone who's worked as an animator, a graphic designer, a painter, a motion designer, a UX designer, I've worked in film, I've worked in photography, I've kind of done a lot of the artistic disciplines here and there. I find that these concepts happen across anything that is visually creative. So here we have a screenshot from the movie La La Land. This movie is a love story. Love being a bright and passionate emotion, but both of its characters are beaten down by the world around them and the difficulty that they feel in trying to chase their dreams. There's a clear contrast there. So to create this contrast, it again goes with a complementary color scheme. Using the yellow of this girl's dress, hair, and their skin tones in the foreground allows them to come closer to the viewer and everything else in the background, the cool tones, to recede. It obviously, of course, also makes the couple stand out. The woman even more so, which I would assume is also intentional, because women are considered to be the more romantic of the 2 options, and as this is a love movie, exaggerating the woman kind of brings this forward. The blues and purples of the background can hint at the fear and the sadness the characters feel while chasing their dreams, but it is juxtaposed to the bright yellow of her dress and their skin tone, and even the bright white of the man's shirt, just bringing a lot of brightness into their love connection. Another example is my favorite album cover, Billie Eilish's Don't Smile at Me. The cover uses warm colors. There is really not much orange here other than Billie's skin, but the red and the yellow are both warm. Despite that, it still achieves contrast by using saturation. You have this extremely bright, heavily saturated red up against a more muted yellow background. It allows the more saturated color to look like it's coming towards us. And if we look at the meaning of these colors, the red and the yellow and the bit and pinch of orange would imply joy, anger, and intensity, which absolutely matches the songs in this album. So let's have a final review. Before you add any color to your next painting or artwork, ask yourself the 3 questions. What is the feeling? What is the story or spacing? And do you need contrast or unity? Once you have your answers, find color schemes to match them. Consider the colors as spacing on the color wheel. Further apart is more contrast, and closer together is more unity. consider the values and the tints that you were using to further create contrast and unity, and to suggest meaning. A darker blue might be sad, a lighter blue might be calming. You can finally also consider the saturation levels to create subtlety or boldness in a piece, or add a little bit more depth. These are just the very beginner, basic principles of the color wheel and color schemes. I didn't even get into how different colors can look different when paired with other colors, or how you need to create color harmony in your pieces, and so on. There's so much more we could go into. If you guys want more videos on color theory, please do let me know in the comments below. And remember that rules are made to be broken. If you try out these rules, get comfortable with them, and understand how to use them, you can try subverting them to subvert our expectations. Maybe you paint someone who is extremely sad and depressed, but you make their skin bright yellows and oranges to hint at something under the surface. My final tip for you in using color theory in your pieces is to remember who helped you learn it. Again, my channel is new and it is quite small. If you are enjoying it, I'd appreciate if you would press subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, give me some engagement, let YouTube know that it should show my video to more people. And I thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you will ask yourself the 3 questions next time that you get into a piece. And I hope you enjoyed learning with me today, because I really enjoyed teaching. I will see you guys in the next one. And until then, doodly. I usually exit the screen for the end of cards, but like there's so much stuff in front of me for filming that I can't really go anywhere. So just click them. Just click them. I'm not here. Just click.